So, a couple of weeks ago we took a look at failed investments in Classic WoW where we lost gold, and today I want to switch that around and take a look at our successful investments in Classic WoW and find out where we actually made gold. I think it's important to take a look at previous investments and see how they did, as well as analyze what happened and why it happened, to actually understand why an investment fails or succeeds, so we can learn from what we've done in the past, to make smarter decisions in the future. So today we will look at our successful investments, how much we bought the items for, how much they're going for now, as well as how much they sold for when I sold them. This is important because some of my investments I've already cashed out on, like Phase 2 and Phase 3 investments, while other investments I'm still holding on to, like Phase 4, Phase 5 and Phase 6 investments. But before we take a look at those items, I just want to take a quick moment to shout out my Patreon page, where you can obtain early access insider info as to which items I'm investing in, how I'm farming my gold, how I'm making my gold, as well as valuable resources when it comes to gold making, both in Classic and in retail. However, if Patreon is not your thing, you can also acquire some gold making tips for free as well over on my Discord server. You can find links to both my Patreon and my Discord server in the description below. So with that little sellout out of the way, I think it's about time we get into the items. Let's start with my favorite item, the small flame Sacs. These were so cheap at the launch of Classic, it's not even funny how cheap they were. I bought these for anywhere between 10 silver and 30 silver each back at launch, and I spent pretty much every single gold I obtained past level 40 on these. Additionally, I farmed certain whelps as well to try and obtain these while leveling, while also trying to obtain the emerald and bronze/crimson whelpling as well. I bought roughly 70 stacks of these at 10 to 30 silver per piece, and I farmed an additional 20 stacks of these as well for a grand total of 90 stacks. However, since I farmed 20 of those, let's look at the grand profit from the 70 stacks I actually bought. Since I bought them from between 10 and 30 silver per piece, let's say I bought them for 20 silver per piece, since that's what the average price would be. So that would be 1 gold per stack, times 70 stacks, so 70 gold investment. I recently sold every single one at 5 gold each, so 25 gold per stack, turning my 70 gold investment into 1,750 gold. This is by far my best investment ever, and I have no clue why these flame sacks were so cheap this early. Well, I do have some guesses as to why, and that's the bag space. Since these only stack up to 5, they would take up so much bag space it would be insane. And I invested really early, and many people farmed these while leveling through the levels of 35 to 45, meaning a lot of people were panic selling to obtain their level 40 mount, and therefore just taking any amount of gold that they could. And if you look at this chart right here, on the 31st of January, small flame sacks only sold for 1.6 gold each, while now they sell for 5.6 gold each, so it kinda makes sense that since I invested in the first week, the prices were way lower. Even if I had invested at the end of January, I would have tripled, almost quadrupled my investment, which is pretty insane to be honest. Now they did actually see a downtrend after the announcement of Phase 4. As you can see on my server right now, they're only 2 gold each. However, this footage is recorded on a Monday, and wait until Wednesday and they're back up to at least 3, maybe 4, or even 5 gold. Reset day for the win. I should also say that when I bought these for that cheap, I kinda took advantage of people just not being bothered to go back to the bank or mail their items away, and I just threw them a lowball offer in the whispers, and some of them actually went and sold their items to me. Next up is a fairly obvious investment, one I've mentioned in quite a few of my videos, and that is Larval Acid. Larval Acid is used in creating various nature assist items, and is one of those items that nobody really needed at launch or in Phase 1 in general. I was able to pick up a few of these anywhere between 1 and 5 gold each, most of them being in the lower range of those numbers, and I think the average price of which I bought them at was around 2 gold, since I did cop quite a few for 1 gold each. I invested in about 25 of these, so I invested roughly 50 gold. I very recently sold all of them at 18 gold each, which was above market value at that time, meaning I turned my 50 gold investment into 450 gold, giving me 400 gold raw profit. I will once again pull up a chart showing you how the item has changed in price from January 31st to February 20th, so only 3 weeks, yet the item has gone up like crazy. At the lower end of the chart you could buy the item for 11 gold each, while at the higher end of the chart the price was 15 gold, and since then it's just kept going up until the announcement of Phase 4, at which point it actually went down again. Next up we have a somewhat more low-key investment, one I did not expect too much of a return on, but is definitely one where I took advantage of the massive number of people playing Classic, as well as layering as well. This is also an investment I'm somewhat proud of, as I haven't heard of many others doing the same, and it is Swift Thistle. However, there is a twist. You see, at the launch of Classic, I was a herbalist myself, and while I was out in the open world questing or farming herbs, if I saw someone herb a Briarthorn or Mage Rail, or in general if I saw someone pick a flower in a zone where they could obtain Swift Thistles, I asked them if I could buy their Swift Thistle. Of course I threw them a lowball offer, but in those levels most people were happy with any gold they could acquire, and especially in the first few days of Classic. I managed to buy Swift Thistles as low as 1 silver each, so 20 silver per stack. However, the average price I bought them for was 50 silver per stack, which people were actually fine with, and most people thanked me for buying their herbs that early, and they didn't even have to go back to the auction house or the mailbox or anything. I invested in 40 stacks, all of which I purchased for around 40 silver per stack, so I invested about 20 gold into this. Again, this was in the beginning of Classic, and I didn't have that much gold myself. This was way before I was level 60, and I was level 60 within the first 10 days of Classic, so I invested 20 gold into 40 stacks of Swift Thistles, which are now worth 78 silver each. All in all, this means I turned my 20 gold investment into 312 gold, which is a pretty good investment if you ask me. I would have loved to invest more, but my plan was to spread my investments out into as many different items in as many different categories as possible, and unfortunately I put too many eggs into one basket when I bought the Shadowfang and Assassin's Blade, but I did get to buy these Swift Thistles and those small flame sacs while leveling, so I'm happy with that profit. As you can see on this chart right here, Swift Thistle barely moved at all in price from January 31st to February 20th. I mean, it went from 68 silver on an average to 78 silver on an average. So there's a small gain, but when it comes to this item, I think the only real way to do it is like I did and invest while everyone was leveling and randomly finding them while leveling, while also being low on bag space, so being willing to sell junk for a small profit. As for why I invested in Swift Thistles personally, I knew it was needed for Thistle Tea, which is needed by pretty much every serious rogue out there, so it would always be in demand throughout all of Classic, and since there are always better gold farm out there than farming lower level herbs, I knew they would keep increasing in value over time. It's pretty simple. As a side note here, I used this same strategy for several other herbs out there as well, which I sold after making my passive gold making in Classic WoW video, when I realized how many people were leveling alchemy, and the prices for certain herbs went through the roof, especially the mid-level herbs that nobody wanted to farm, like Mage Royale, King's Blood, Briarthorn, Strangle Kelp, and so on. Many people were leveling several tunes to 35 and skilling up alchemy, to start making gold passively through Arcanite transmutes, which I took advantage of and manipulated the prices to my advantage. I also don't think we can talk about investments without mentioning elemental fires. 2 gold each at the beginning of Classic, maybe even lower at some point. I personally did not invest too much into this item, simply because I had already invested most of my gold and I didn't have the motivation at the time to keep grinding gold, so I kinda just stopped. However, we can simply look at this chart right here and see how much the price moved in just 3 weeks from the end of January to the middle of February. It went from 6 gold average to 10 gold average, almost doubling its value at the arrival of Phase 3 and the Blackwing Lair. I think this was pretty much expected, and many investors invested huge amounts of gold into this item, which is probably why it has kept going up in price steadily throughout all of Classic as well. It started somewhat low and it's just kept going up and up and up. Speaking of investing, here's an item I wish I would have invested in: Black Lotus. This was selling for between 50 and 60 gold for like a month after Classic's release, which I already thought was pretty high, so I didn't even think it could go up at this point, because in my opinion 50 to 60 gold was already too much. However, the price of Black Lotus will always be based on how much you can get from other farms out there, as well as the fact that every serious raider will want these in AQ and Nax, especially Nax, and they are very limited when it comes to supply, while the demand is already pretty much there. Right now on Firemaw, these are selling for 140 gold, which is more than double of what they sold for in the first month of Classic over here, meaning that anyone that invested in it would have doubled their gold really easily, and the price can still go up as well. But most of my investments I made much more profit percentage-wise than I would on Black Lotus anyway, so I don't feel like I missed out on too much. Now, because this video is already pretty long, and because I've pretty much covered most of these items in previous videos, so it's obvious why they have gone up or will go up in price, I'm going to list some items that I have invested some gold into, but not too much. The items I've already mentioned were my main investments and my best investments. These are just some extra investments that I made that has been somewhat successful. Star Rubies, Purple Lotus, Stone Scale Eel, Heart of Fire, Grave Moss, Ghost Mushroom, Fellcloth, Mooncloth, Dreamfoil, Plague Bloom, Grum's Blood, Mountain Silver Sage, Blue Sapphires, Sandworm Meat, and large and huge Venom Sacs. I know there are many other great investments out there and many other items that would have made profit over time, like Elemental Earth, but since this video is mostly about items I've personally had success investing in, I choose not to talk too much about the items I have not invested in. Make sure you let me know in the comments down below which items you've invested in, and which investments you've made most profit with. I chose to make this video because it is fun to look at exactly how much profit I've made, as well as I think both I and you can use this knowledge to better predict which items will become successful investments in the Burning Crusade, if or when that happens, or in fresh Classic servers if or when that happens. We can look at which categories of items made the most profit, which is pretty obviously endgame consumables for raiding, and we can use that knowledge in future investments. I hope you found this video enjoyable and helpful, and I hope I earned your thumbs up on this video. I will also leave links to my Phase 4 and Phase 5 investment videos, where I cover what to invest in to make gold in Phase 4 and Phase 5, so if you haven't seen those already and you want to make some easy gold, go and watch them. Also, a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for supporting me over there. You guys are legends. If you did enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.